Chapter 7, New Faces, New Tensions. Grace arrived at the office the next morning with an unusual sense of calm. The memory of her time with Simon in the park, the way his kiss had made her feel, was still fresh in her mind. It was as if the world had shifted slightly, leaving her more aware of her own emotions and the possibilities ahead. She walked into the building with her usual air of confidence, but there was a softness to her today, a quiet sense of contentment that hadn't been there before. As she passed her colleagues, she exchanged polite smiles and greetings, her thoughts still partially occupied by Simon. When she reached her office, she found a fresh bouquet of flowers on her desk, elegant white lilies, her favorite. A small card was tucked inside the bouquet, and she felt her heart flutter as she pulled it out. Thank you for last night. Looking forward to seeing where this goes. Simon. Grace couldn't help but smile, tucking the card back into the bouquet as she sat down at her desk. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a sensation she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. But before she could fully indulge in the moment, a knock on her office door pulled her back to reality. "Come in," Grace called, slipping back into her professional demeanor. The door opened, and Hannah, one of the newer hires in the marketing department, stepped inside. She was young, fresh out of university, with a bubbly personality and a natural charm that had quickly made her popular in the office. Today, she looked particularly polished, her dark hair perfectly styled and her outfit carefully chosen to accentuate her slim figure. "Good morning, Grace," Hannah said with a bright smile, her tone as cheerful as always. "I just wanted to drop off the latest campaign reports for your review." "Thank you, Hannah," Grace replied, taking the folder from her. "I'll look over these later today." Hannah lingered by the desk, her eyes flicking to the bouquet of flowers. "Those are beautiful. Special occasion?" Grace hesitated for a moment, considering how much she wanted to share. "Just a nice surprise," she said simply, her tone nonchalant. Hannah's smile widened slightly, as if she knew something more. "It's always nice to have someone who appreciates you," she said, her tone light but with a hint of something else. Grace raised an eyebrow, curious. "Is there something on your mind, Hannah?" Hannah looked momentarily flustered, but she quickly recovered, her smile unwavering. "Oh, nothing, really. Well, I couldn't help but notice that Simon's been a bit more attentive lately." Grace felt a small pang of unease at Hannah's words, but she kept her expression neutral. "Simon and I work closely together on several projects. It's part of the job." "Of course," Hannah agreed, but there was a subtle gleam in her eye that Grace didn't miss. "He's quite the catch, though, isn't he? I mean, I've noticed a few of the other girls around the office trying to get his attention." Grace's heart gave a small jolt, but she remained composed. "Simon is a valued member of the team, and I'm sure he handles any attention professionally." Hannah nodded, her smile a little too sweet. "Oh, definitely. But you know how it is, office dynamics can be tricky, especially when there's someone as attractive as Simon around. It's hard not to notice." Grace felt a flicker of irritation, but she kept her tone even. "Simon is good at what he does, and that's what matters to me." Hannah's expression softened slightly, as if sensing she had pushed too far. "Of course, Grace. I didn't mean to imply anything. I admire how you manage everything with such grace and poise." Grace gave a small, polite smile. "Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate the compliment." With that, Hannah gave a quick nod and excused herself, leaving Grace alone with her thoughts. As soon as the door closed, Grace's smile faded, replaced by a sense of unease she hadn't felt in years. She couldn't deny that Simon's presence in her life had brought up emotions she hadn't expected. But now, with Hannah's words lingering in the air, she felt a twinge of doubt, a reminder that she wasn't the only one who might have noticed Simon's qualities. Shaking off the feeling, Grace turned back to her work, trying to refocus her mind. But as she went through the motions of her day, she couldn't quite shake the image of Hannah's knowing smile, or the subtle suggestion that others might be vying for Simon's attention as well. When lunchtime rolled around, Grace was almost relieved to see Simon standing in her office doorway again. He was dressed impeccably, as always, his presence filling the room with a quiet confidence that she found both comforting and alluring. "Busy day?" Simon asked, echoing his words from the day before. Grace nodded, closing the file she'd been working on. "It's been nonstop, but nothing I can't handle." Simon smiled, that familiar warmth in his eyes. "I'm sure you're handling it brilliantly. How about we grab lunch? There's a new place I've been wanting to try, and I'd love your company." Grace felt a pang of hesitation, the memory of Hannah's words still fresh in her mind. But the way Simon looked at her, the sincerity in his invitation, pushed those doubts aside. "Lunch sounds good," she agreed, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. As they walked out of the office together, Grace couldn't help but notice a few of the other women glancing their way, some with curiosity, others with something closer to envy. She felt a strange mix of emotions, pride at being the one Simon chose to spend time with, but also a hint of the vulnerability that came with realizing she wasn't the only one who saw his appeal. They made their way to the restaurant, a stylish new bistro with a modern menu. The atmosphere was lively but intimate, and as they were seated, "So, how's your day been?" Simon asked as they settled in, his eyes focused intently on her. Grace considered his question, wondering how much she should share. She decided to be honest. "Busy, but that's nothing new. I had an interesting conversation with Hannah this morning." Simon raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What about?" Grace hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. "She seemed curious about you. Mentioned that a few of the women in the office have taken notice." Simon chuckled softly, his expression amused, but not dismissive. "I've noticed some attention, but I don't pay it much mind. I'm here to do my job, not to get caught up in office politics." Grace felt a wave of relief at his response, but also a hint of something else, something she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. "That's good to hear," she said, her tone light but with an underlying seriousness. "The last thing we need is unnecessary complications." Simon reached across the table, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The touch was brief, but it sent a familiar warmth through her. "Grace, you have nothing to worry about. I'm exactly where I want to be." Grace met his gaze, her heart fluttering at the intensity she saw there. "I'm glad to hear that, Simon," she replied, her voice softening. Their conversation flowed easily after that, the connection between them strengthening with each passing moment. But as much as Grace enjoyed their time together, she couldn't completely banish the thoughts that had been stirred up earlier. By the time they returned to the office, Grace felt a strange mixture of emotions, contentment from being with Simon, but also a nagging sense of unease that she couldn't quite shake. As she watched Simon return to his desk, the way the other women in the office subtly glanced his way didn't escape her notice. It was a reminder that, despite the growing connection between them, there were other forces at play, forces she hadn't anticipated but would need to navigate carefully. For now, though, Grace decided to focus on the moment, on the way Simon had made her feel, and on the possibilities that lay ahead. But deep down, she knew that the path forward might be more complicated than she had initially thought, and that she would need to tread carefully if she wanted to protect what was blossoming between them. Click follow for the next chapters.